So that's going to be basically our baseline. Here is once again our standard balance sheet, which is ran as of a point in time. Now, if we want to do a comparative report, then we're going to have to want multiple periods, and there's multiple ways we can do multiple period reports. Noting that you might want either just 2 periods as a comparison, like we've been doing, comparing just last year and this year, or you might want more than 2 periods. For example, you might want months so that you have 3 months in a quarter, 12 months in a year, or you might run it in quarters. So that means that you're going to have more than just 2 columns. Now, if you are just comparing 2 things, 2 columns, you have a further choice of, do we want to subtract the 2 columns, taking the difference between the 2 columns, and then possibly also having a percentage calculation looking at the percentage change from one period to another. We also have the question of, if we have 2 columns representing 2 periods, do we want to have the older period up front and then the new periods on the right, which is the way we would possibly first think about aligning the data, reading from left to right, older to newer. But it also makes more sense sometimes to put the more current period on the left, because then you're going to be reading it first if you're reading from left to right, and then have the less relevant and older data to the right. So those are some choices that we have. Now, what we have been doing whenever we set up the company file is we've been choosing a 2-year time frame and then selecting years in the dropdown. When we do it that way, it will typically create 2 periods, and it's going to put the older one up front. In this case, let's do a similar process just to see that comparison, but we have 1 year's worth of data this time. So if I select this dropdown, which is located here, remember that if you're in the switch to modern mode, just to take a look at it, what it looks like in the modern mode, you have then the display, and then here's going to be your display columns. And then you have the further drop down here under the dates, where you have the day, month, quarter, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go back to the classic mode for now. Just note that you can use either of those. I'm going to switch back to classic. We still don't really know where QuickBooks will land as they A/B test these different formats of the screen, but the functionality in essence is the same. It's just the look and the feel of it. So we might, if I choose a whole year, I then might say, well, I want to see it in terms of months, and then I'm going to run it to refresh it. And so now it's given me a whole lot of data. Now, because this is a balance sheet reports, and balance sheet reports report as of a point in time, it's going to give us each of these months, but basically report as of the end of the month. So here's where our data was, in other words, at January 31st, 2025. February 28th or 29th, 2025, March 31st, 2025, and so on. Let's also this time take a look at it in quarters, which will be a little bit easier to see, and run that to refresh it. So now notice you only have 4 quarters, which are running 3-month time periods. So although this says January through March for the quarter, it's really just reporting as of the end of the period, the end of March, the end of the quarter. Whereas if I go to the income statement, you will recall if I run this by quarter, for example, and run that, then it's going to give me the quarter information. I have a 2-year time frame up top instead of a 1 year, but notice it's given me the quarters which represent the activity for a particular quarter, meaning the beginning to the end of the quarter, and it gives me a total column because it's totaling everything up for this 2-year frame. We don't get this total column when we're on a balance sheet type of report because it doesn't make sense to sum up the columns in that case. So that's just something to keep in mind. We'll get to the income statement reports running similar reports in future presentations. So that's one way that we can do it. It's reporting when we do it this way from the oldest to the newest, and we can have more than one column. So we don't just have 2 comparative points, but more than 2 comparative points. What I can't do, however, is subtract the 2 very easily. I can't basically say this is one column minus the other because there's more than 2 comparative columns.